Welcome to our study. Well, actually, this is a study and practice session. So the first part here is then the study component. We're presently studying Steven Goodman's The Buddhist Psychology of Awakening, which is a really good introduction to the Abhidharma. Actually, it says an in-depth guide to Abhidharma, so I probably shouldn't market it too much as being sort of like just a lightweight introduction. So yes, an in-depth guide to Abhidharma. So welcome to that, and then this will be followed then by a little bit of discussion on meditation and then actual practice in conjunction with Jamgon Mipam's Treasure of Blessing text. So presently then, within the book that we're studying, then we're looking at the Four Noble Truths. So let's get that out. And well, you might say, well, I've heard about the Four Noble Truths before. I don't need to be told what the Four Noble Truths are. But I would argue it's really important. The Four Noble Truths, they differ so radically from how we very often approach things like the our understanding of reality, particularly in a philosophical or in a spiritual context, that they're really important that we identify and really are comfortable with. And very often, the various presentations of the Four Noble Truths can provide different insights. Different teachers teach the Four Noble Truths in different ways. So revisiting them again and again always provide a really provocative, you could say, expansion of our understanding of the Four Noble Truths. So they're really worthwhile coming back to. I would always say what's really important about the Four Noble Truths, particularly then when it comes to something like the Buddhist understanding of reality and so on, is that the Four Noble Truths do not operate with two very disempowering and very pervasive discourses. One is that everything was created by somebody that can only be contacted through our submission or our obedience or whatever, some external agent. And the other is that the universe is beyond our power, and we're just, you could say, random little bleeps on the horizon. So in this way, the understanding of the universe is essentially that we're just material phenomena that are here without much really agency. And this is, both of these actually, they actually fly in the face of our immediate experience, which is actually what we do in terms of how we think about things, how we interact with things, actually has a big influence on our reality. And that's where the Four Noble Truths, the way that the Four Noble Truths present causation and how actually our situation should be understood in terms of something we can do something about, is very empowering. So with the Four Noble Truths, there's a lot to be said about them, but one very important point is certainly that the Four Noble Truths operate with this empowering perspective of agency, that what we do matters and has an influence. So someone says, is Buddhism a religion? Well, I got my Australian citizenship and residency on the basis of being a minister of religion, so I should be the first to sort of endorse Buddhism as a religion, but I'm actually the first to argue that thanks to Buddhism being labeled a religion, then it gets marginalized and basically ignored as essentially ignorance. When we nowadays in the modern, you could say, educated discourse speak about religion, it's very much understood as being systems of belief, systems of metaphysics, and as such, not really science. It's not really founded on evidence-based science. And that's where religion is essentially equated with non-truth. science is very often equated with truth, and religion, being non-truth, is then essentially seen as something that's ignorance. So religion is very often seen as some sort of social sort of a construct that operates within societies to provide meaning or to have some role in terms of morals and so on. So it's seen as a construct, as an invention, but very often also seen as being consolidated by blind beliefs and essentially ignorance. So the modern enlightened person, the modern educated person, would be very loath to actually be associated with ignorance, and as such also to be associated with religion. So Buddhism, rather, being founded on inquiry and analysis and hard intelligence, is, from that perspective, certainly not, doesn't share those assumptions that the modern perception of religion comes with. Why Buddhism ends up being seen as a religion is because it deals with things that that traditionally religion is associated with, and things that modern materialist mechanistic science does not deal with, and that is the intangible aspect of experience, of feeling, of consciousness. And by its own admission, modern science regards consciousness and the intangible dimension of subjectivity as the hard problem of science. And so when Buddhism obviously operates with the spiritual, with the intangible dimension of our experience and the subjective dimension, then it's classified as religion. And Buddhism speaks about what we traditionally understand as salvation. It talks about enlightenment, and it talks about the perfect experience, the perfect understanding, which is enlightenment, and the falling away of ignorance. And that is something that's not at all within the scope of our ordinary science. It talks about the primacy of consciousness, and hence also this life is not seen as, the consciousness is not seen as just ultimately contingent on the body. And so from that perspective, then Buddhism speaks about rebirth, that basically the re-embodiment of the mind. And from that point of view, that also Buddhism gets labeled as religion, and all the various aspects of Buddhist practice, the path, is also seen as being religion. It's sort of associated with the path of salvation. And so, unfortunately, then we do have many things that explain why Buddhism ends up being classified as a religion. But the foundational, what we could call epistemic premise, the knowledge of Buddhism, is founded on what in effect is verifiable science. The only thing is, what is verified is consciousness. So for example, we operate with the notion of that we can work with, let's say, impatience. We might be impatient, easily angry, and within the Buddhist teaching, we identify anger as something that actually influences our perceptions and is profoundly destructive. And there are ways of working with that, but that's never ever something that falls into a category of belief system or anything. That's simply just phenomenology or working with our consciousness. So in this way also, but then again, Buddhism is also not the same as psychology, because Buddhism operates with the notion of complete elimination of a delusion that actually doesn't figure in psychology, which is the delusion of self. So in Buddhism, we would say the whole notion of self and the objectification of self and other, or objectification of other in relation to the self, that's seen as a that's seen as a delusional construct. It's essentially, this perception is seen in Buddhism as a sort of dysfunction of the mind. So that's where also Buddhism parts from psychology and has this vast vision of enlightenment. And the qualities of the path go way beyond the ordinary understanding of what the ordinary individual is capable of. So I'm sorry I'm giving such a long answer, but then again, it's a big question, and it's an important question. So and I'm afraid there's a lot to be said about it, but the short answer is no. So is Buddhism a religion? No, for all the above reasons. But that's there's a lot to be said about that, and there's a lot to be said also in terms of understanding. I mean, we have to be a bit patient with our culture, where really there's not that much understanding of the whole dimension of what consciousness is, to what the whole notion of enlightenment. So yes. So anyway, there you had the answer, and yes, you can go to the recording later. Yeah. So anyway, thank you for asking that, and that of course is the premise of what we really are studying here. Okay. So let's look at so Steven is presently talking about the Four Noble Truths. We have a problem, and this also, of course, this is where what we have in terms of Buddhism as a science, more than anything, is an applied science, because we understand theoretically where there's the problem, the suffering, where it comes from, on the basis of understanding there's suffering, there's a cause of suffering. But then there's a third noble truth, which really spells out wonderful news, and that is that it's a curable condition, cessation. We can cure this. And so that's where the application comes in the sense that we can identify it's a curable condition, and then, well, really the fourth noble truth is then the application, where we then do something about it. But all of this spells out also a big difference in how we understand our reality, because we're not really going to understand our reality as long as there is delusion. So this delusion veils our understanding of reality. So also within the Four Noble Truths, we begin to already see how two different sciences can emerge, because there's a science that just observes what you could say somewhat naively is assumed to be an existing reality that exists objectively without any influence of the perceiver. And then there's the science that recognizes that our perception of the objective dimension is entirely caught up with the observer and constructed by the observer. And as such, as long as the observer still is not, you could say, clear-headed, as long as there's still delusion, as long as there's still this mistaken understanding that solidifies reality in the way that it actually doesn't exist, then we have a flawed science. So as long as we're caught up by that, then we don't really see reality clearly. And it's only when we begin to actually eliminate then this delusion that we begin to have an understanding of what reality is. And that's again where, coming back to, is Buddhism a religion or not? No, it's not. It's about working with the conditions, but working with the conditions of the mind. If we're going to be studying external matters, whether it's on a subatomic level or on a particle level, or if it's externally, we need particular instruments. We need microscopes, or we need telescopes, or whatever, and these need to be of optimal condition. And also the way that we observe it has to be free from partiality and bias and so forth. And similarly also then, for us to properly understand consciousness and to see properly reality, then we need to remove the conditions that veil. So anyway, we come to the third insight, which is then cessation. And this is where Steven then says, the Buddha furthermore said that this coming together of conditions that cause this crowdedness can be completely destroyed. Not mere lessened, but destroyed or annihilated. And again, this is really the good news. This crowdedness is what we looked at earlier, the the dukkha, the density of our delusion. And this is something that's not basic to us. And again, some of us who grew up in latter modernity, we were sort of brought up to believe, like, you know, it's impossible to go beyond egotism, you know, the selfish gene, and the idea that, you know, the lowest common denominator, and in the sense that everybody's basically egotistical and so on, you know, the human race is evil and so on, is very deeply embedded within a lot of our cultural assumptions. And a lot of really depressed art, literature, and so on, centers on the fact that, you know, everybody's essentially selfish. And so the third noble truth is really extraordinary in the sense that it identifies how our condition is not just that we could become nicer people, but essentially our condition is ultimately free of this self, this crowdedness. And that's where the Buddha made the point that we can eliminate this, we can destroy it, annihilate it, in the sense that we can remove this delusion. So Stephen continues, the word he used for his third noble truth or insight about reality was nirodha, a word which means to annihilate. This is a very strong word. Nirodha means to annihilate the condition of this crowded, painful situation. So also we use the word nirodha to sometimes to refer to the condition of settling into a condition of no more suffering. Gokpa in Tibetan. So this is sometimes where we would say some spiritual paths, they lead us to a place of this annihilation of suffering, which is not identical necessarily to complete enlightenment. But anyway, the point really here is that the third noble truth is that this condition of suffering can be remedied. Stephen then continues, so far, we presented the first three of the four noble truths. They are the fact of crowdedness, as in dukkha, suffering, the fact that this crowdedness is due to concrete, discoverable conditions, meaning we can work with it. This suffering is not given to us from external agency. It is not something that just happens and we have no control over, but it's not basic to us. It's not like we're meant to suffer, we will suffer. It's due to concrete discoverable conditions, meaning conditions that we can work with. So this is wonderful. So that's just like if we have a curable illness, yeah, we can see what we're doing, you know, we can change our lifestyle, we can do exercise, we can stop smoking, blah, blah. There's things that can be done. Third, the fact that these conditions, which are temporary and concrete, can completely cease. They will be annihilated. They will be blown out, better known as nirvana. And when we say concrete, that's in the sense that they're real. It's not like something mystical and some sort of vague weirdness is sort of happening that's beyond our control. If we have anger, then anger will create our suffering. If we have excessive greed, then obviously that's something that, you know, continually propels us into a sense of poverty and so forth. So we're working with the mind, and this mind is not something that's completely out of our control. It's something that we can work with in a very real, concrete way. So Buddha said, Stephen continues, that nirvana / nirodha, the cessation of all upset, results in a peaceful shanti way of being, one which is also relaxing, harmonious, and spacious. But he cautions that this state is not just the opposite of dukkha. When speaking of nirvana, this spaciousness is a radiant mode of being that is beyond all distinction between what is pleasant, sukha, and painful, dukkha. Therefore, it is called the great or absolute sukha, mahasukha. Nirvana is mahasukha, is beyond the distinctions of sunny and cloudy. It refers to the radiant, continuous expanse of the sky, which accommodates all weather patterns. So presently, we are very attached to the sort of nice white clouds of sukha, and we are very sort of disturbed by the sort of dense, dark rain clouds of dukkha. So we presently would like to just have, the nice weather, and we'd want to avoid the bad weather. But the thing is, the sky itself is uncontaminated by one thing or the other. So liberation doesn't lie in us getting what we want. It actually lies in us going beyond this condition of poverty that seeks constantly to have something and avoid something else. So the expanse of the sky is a very good image for that. We could also see it in terms of when we are dreaming. We can have a pleasant dream, we can have a painful dream, but then when we wake up, we're actually beyond that. And so also awakening and the original condition of this purity that we naturally possess is beyond these fleeting experiences of pleasure and pain, and beyond the sort of the predicament of wishing to hold on to pleasure and avoid what is painful. It's an expansive reality that is not conditioned in this narrow way of seeking one thing and avoiding another. So that's where this vastness of nirvana comes into, and as such, it's beyond the distinctions that we ordinarily operate from. Okay. Okay. Question. Please, can you please elaborate the first sentence in relation to crowdedness aspect with an example? Well, crowdedness is just dukkha. We've already been through that in the previous section. So dukkha means dissatisfaction, and we also looked at sort of the etymology of it as being the wheel that's not quite working. And basically, dukkha is this condition of things just not being quite right. So that's what's implicit. We're beside ourselves. So in that sense, dukkha is the basic dissatisfaction that lies at the very core of what our existence, as we know it, is tainted with. In Western philosophy, literature, and so on, we sometimes talk about existential angst or Weltschmerz and these kind of things, where there's a notion of a basic flaw in our existence that very often is assumed to just be basic to our existence, and that's again very much something that permeates a lot of contemporary literature and art and so on, and very often is part of this sort of the rather depressed view that we're bound to suffer. And that's exactly what the Buddha begs, where the Buddha begs to differ. So crowdedness really just refers to this fundamental condition of discomfort. Bhikkhu Bodhi, translator of the Pali Canon, refers to it as stress sometimes. And Stephen here uses the idea, refers to it as crowdedness. And someone says, today I became aware of a strong feeling of loneliness and also my response to not wanting to feel lonely. In terms of practice, I wasn't sure how to work with it. I tried to let the feeling of loneliness be there. I found, though, I just kept getting lost and caught up in not wanting it and trying then to convince myself that there is no self who is lonely. Can you please speak a bit about how to work with it? Thank you. Well, this is particularly in this COVID era, this is very much, all of us, or not, but many of us are sort of forced into a condition of isolation in one form or another. We can't travel to where we used to. And in general, it is basic to us as humans, the loneliness. Yeah, that's a very big one. The reality is we are lonely and we're going to be traveling alone. We would like to have companionship. We would like to be part of others, and yet we are lonely. And that's not something that just will go away with I could speak to the cows come home about the philosophical implications of how to work with this, but I'm afraid it's going to be the same answer that we have with anything really on the Buddhist path, which is we need to analyze this condition and see what are the basic causes for our suffering, and how to work with that. Loneliness and the conditions of just experiencing being alone won't go away. We will be left alone. And it's just like we're also going to encounter things that we don't like. And the things that we do like, we're going to lose them. So we have, for example, we have, the what we call the 4 big waves of suffering. That is basic to why the Buddha taught, which is why he left the palace. He discovered that there's sickness. He discovered there's old age and there's dying. And while this might at one point sort of be, hearing about something that potentially could happen sometime, for many of us, it's approaching pretty damn quickly. And that, in addition to loneliness, also spells out that the basic condition of the ordinary individual is really something that needs addressing in a big way. It's not just that we can have sort of a bit of Dharma on the side to sort of take off the brunt of our everyday frustration. It's a big one, and it's the big one that really everybody struggles with. So yes, that's right. There is no self. There is no self, and the feeling of suffering and the frustration with being on our own is just a thought. But one, that we don't have a self, that's something we need to establish. 2, letting go of that thought actually requires that we do practice meditation. So of course there's a lot we can say in terms of making us feel better about we're together with all the human race, or we're together with all sentient beings, and that works. But ultimately there's also a place where, and probably when we get held by pain, we become quite skeptical and to some extent cynical, and that's where we want something that really sort of cuts down to really sort of the reality of the nature of things. And that is where we then will want to apply analysis that looks into, is there a self or not? And also then the application of it, which is then the practice of meditation. So that's both the good and the bad news. It's workable, but it's not easy. Then it not being easy, it's something we have to do. There's some Lojong practice that can, you could say, make this a little bit more workable, and that is we can think, and that's where compassion really changes everything. We can think, this, what I'm going through, is what all sentient beings go through at one point or another. They will have to leave behind everybody that's dear to them. Everybody will wander alone. And through my experience of loneliness, may the loneliness of others, may they be free of that. And that's where the pain that we can experience, we could then say, we can meditate that it's something that works towards the alleviation of the suffering of others. That's how we work with it in Lojong. And that's one of many ways of working with these experiences in Lojong. Do we have thoughts when we are not conscious of them? What's going on in the mind when we're not conscious of our thoughts? Well, in general, we are not conscious of thoughts. They run as an undertow, and that's where what we're doing with meditation is that we're beginning to become conscious of our whole dimension of our mind. This is where we begin to become, much more conscious. So basically, with meditation, we also begin to see the sort of the undertow of the mind and the thoughts that are constantly sort of driving us. But thoughts are there always, I mean, yes, there will be times when we maybe have less thoughts or we're not held by thoughts, but thoughts are there and they inform a lot of our attitudes. So it's so important that we're aware of the thoughts and not getting caught by them. And that's not that easy. And that's why the practice of shamatha and vipassana is really essential. Someone says, Lojong is a fantastic practice. Indeed it is. Actually, one book I keep next to me, I have The Way of the Bodhisattva as one, and the other is actually a book by Chögyam Trungpa called Training the Mind and Cultivating Loving Kindness. Such an amazing pith instruction in practice of Lojong. Okay, then somebody says, can we say that Tonglen helps to a certain extent too with the idea of loneliness? Very much. very much, because then we are thinking of the suffering others are having, their loneliness, and we take it upon ourselves. And then within that courageous space of recognizing the insubstantial nature of phenomena, then we just take it in, and then we give out all our happiness to sentient beings, and we put ourselves there. It's important because we're shifting our perspective from being a victim of our circumstances into being caregivers. So, many of us, we operate within a caregiver situation, and that's actually such an empowered place, really. So that's where in Lojong, then, we shift our whole psychological attitude through this becoming caregivers. So we take on the suffering of others, and we give out our own happiness, well-being. Okay. So, fourth insight, the path to the cessation of suffering. So here, where then the Dharma is an applied science. So we've understood there's a predicament, there's a problem, there's suffering, there's dukkha. Then there is a cause, and the marvelous thing is that due to this dukkha being caused, it can be worked with. The condition is curable. Remember this. Take one thing with you from here. It is, remember, samsara is a curable condition. The Buddha said suffering basically is curable. Unfortunately, many people think Buddhism says everything is suffering. That's not right. There is suffering, but it's curable. That's the real message. And also, I'm always quoting Tolsa Rinpoche, who says, if there's one thing that you should sustain, if you take refuge in the Buddha, that is this recognition that our confusion is removable. So how do we do that then? Fourth insight, the path to the cessation of suffering, basically the cure. Steven says, the fourth insight or truth the Buddha discovered is that each person has the innate capacity for discovering precisely how to annihilate the conditions that cause suffering. The term he used for this capacity was marga, path or journey. This is the capacity to learn how to annihilate the conditions which cause dukkha, this crowded situation, and thereby be moved away from one's former pain and suffering. Traversing the path elaborated by the Buddha Dharma through study and practice provides concrete methods for showing us how to live in a more calm and stable way, and for showing how one can journey out of the thick darkness and into the light, into the spacious expanse of full and complete being. In a more psychological sense of the teachings on the Four Noble Truths, path names the progressive discovery and stabilization of precisely how to go about dissolving, annihilating, and no longer being conditioned by the conditions which cause suffering. So here we're looking at the fact that we can actually move from a condition of suffering into an open condition that is beyond. So that's really what the Buddha was about. That's why, if we talk about medicine, let's say the study of medicine is not to identify that everybody's sick or that people are sick. It's to understand why people are sick. Can we cure it? And if so, proceed with the application. And that's then something that requires an engagement, of course, also from the individual. The doctor is not actually able to cure us, but the doctor can indicate how we can cure ourselves. There's no waving of any magic wand. There's a process, there's a journey. So this means that when we have then the recipe for this, then we need to apply it. And that's where there is the practice and the journey, which consists of study and practice. And so that's then where there's a temporary condition of progressing from being ill into being well. And that is then also the transition from being delusional, crazed, stuck in samsara, a wandering sentient being, into being a Buddha. So that's where we talk about three particular, you could say, moments. One is the moment of delusion, samsara. One is the moment of the path, and one is the moment then of freedom, which is nirvana. So we talk about what Steven is implying here then is that we have these three moments, which are then the samsara, the path, and nirvana. So this all comes down to working with particular causes and conditions. So of course, while we're ill, then we need to work with the conditions of the illness. Once we no longer are ill, then we're beyond any conditioning. Then we're good. Steven continues, now, of course, annihilating these conditions will take a bit of work. It doesn't just happen in the same way that Newton, who was hit on his head by an apple falling from a tree, is said to have discovered the law of gravity. So it's not, and very often we have sort of a romantic idea of Satori, sort of, oh, I got it, Steven says it's not the case for most people that we just see how things are and are then liberated. We don't typically say, oh, now I see, all conditions are impermanent. Voila, I'm liberated. Now, so Steven says this might be so for some individuals, and he actually talks about how one arhat, let's just see the footnote. He says, Steven says, I always remember a story in the life of the Buddha. He had one karmically very gifted disciple who, upon sighting one slightly graying hair, completely understood the nature of all conditioned phenomena, understood that the nature of all conditioned phenomena was impermanent, and thereupon instantly became an arhat. And we also have this sort of legacy from the 1960s sort of interpretation of Japanese Zen, sort of as interpreted by the beats, that you'd have this sort of satori, and all of a sudden, you got it. And so there's all these sort of romantic ideas of persons who had sort of an instant enlightenment and so on. And it happens. You have some extraordinary persons, whether they're fully enlightened or not is always questionable, but you do have some extraordinary individuals that had a moment of awakening. But that is far between. And so like Steven says, normally it takes a bit of work. It's not that this entails some type of mental torture, but it does require some sense of spaciousness, good-hearted inquiry, and also some discrimination about which food nourishes us and which is appropriate to how we are at the moment. So of course, it's a very individual journey where we then need to apply really an insight into how we are and what works for us. To extend the metaphor, a good practitioner is one who becomes a bit of a food connoisseur, a gourmand. I'm afraid I'm going to have to disagree with Steven here. The gourmand is the one who likes to sort of stuff themselves. That's actually not the connoisseur. The connoisseur is the gourmet. So we very often talk about gourmet cuisine. That's the food connoisseur, but so be it. That's okay. So I think the editor ought to have caught this one really, gourmet. Anyway, the point is that the good practitioner understands what's happening with the mind and then how to actually work with the mind in terms of applying the remedy, the practices or the methods of the path. Finding the food that corresponds to our nature is the way, the path that is the path leading to cessation. In that sense, then all sincere study and practice can be part of the path. So that's where we then apply the path. And this is not, like he says, not about mental torture. It's really about just doing something which works well. We eat well, we feel good. So all the way along the path, we would say the path is good in the beginning, middle, and end. Just like if we begin to alleviate a particular disposition, a particular condition of suffering, right from the start we begin to feel less pain and we feel better and better and better. So in that sense, the process is one of applying discerning and becoming, you could say, less and less afflicted. So then there's a question here: is the curability of dukkha ongoing? As in, we don't just get cured, then that's it. We put our feet up, we keep working with our experience and our mind. No, the path is continually then one of alleviating suffering, and it's really until the very finest cause of suffering is eliminated that we refer to this as the path. So we would say the bodhisattva on the ninth bhumi is still on the path. Bodhisattva on the ninth bhumi is not putting their feet up yet. At the time of enlightenment, we're also not putting our feet up, because putting our feet up really comes from a place of actually thinking, it's it's exhausting or something. I need to chill out, That's very much a sort of a poverty-stricken sense that's implicit in samsara, that it's exhausting. But at enlightenment, there's no longer any sense of some task or anything. And you could say, once we attain enlightenment, when we're completely free of dukkha, then we actually really get going. That's actually when we really sort of our activity for sentient beings then becomes unlimited. Yeah. Okay. My little nerdy, how do you say, objection to the gourmand is being confirmed here. So someone says, yes, French speaker here agree. And then there's also an actual French person who says très très bien. So that's thumbs up. Anyway, and then someone says, about these three moments, and this is referring to to samsara, the path, and nirvana, can it be said that there's some sort of certainty about, once one has entered the moment of being on the path, that this will continue to be so in our subsequent lives, considering we don't attain full enlightenment in this very lifetime? That really depends. That's why actually there's no guarantee, but we would say once we've entered the path, we're heading in the right direction. Now the thing is, we don't know what kind of karma we have. That's why we would say better to apply ourselves as much as we can presently, and also make strong aspirations that we will continue to meet the Dharma in our future lives. So that's why we very often make that's why we very often make the aspiration, in all my lives, may I encounter the teaching, may I encounter teachers, and may I be able to practice and persevere in the Dharma, and ultimately benefit others. Yeah. So we actually don't know what we have right now. Well, I mean, we don't know what will come in the future. Right now, we have the ideal conditions. So this is an extremely rare moment. So we pray that we might have these conditions again in the future. Yeah. Someone says, could you please repeat the three moments? Yeah, this is basically samsara, nirvana, and the path. So samsara here, then the path, and then nirvana. These three. Old dog practitioners. In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, there's talk about old dog practitioners. An old dog practitioner is likened by many great masters to a rock that sits in a riverbed. For hundreds of years, fresh water has been running over it, and one could imagine, oh, that rock is so wet and shiny. But at some one point, someone might make an inquiry into the actual nature of that rock. They might lift it out of the river, crack it open, and discover that inside it's completely dry. That is a metaphor for old dog practitioners. They've been submerged in the river of the Dharma for a long time, but that sublime water of the Dharma has not yet penetrated into their core. So that's sort of a metaphor, an image for being, you could say, thick-skinned, not penetrated by the Dharma, and that's not particularly a desirable condition. Let me just make one little comment here. If you read Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, and you come to the last chapter, called Tantra. In there, Chogyam Trungpa will refer to the condition of enlightenment, and particularly he refers to Milarepa as having achieved the level of old dog. And here Chogyam Trungpa is talking about something else. So let's not confuse the two. One here is the undesirable condition of being essentially, you could say, impenetrable. But Chogyam Trungpa talks about the old dog as being a condition of no longer having any hopes and fears, being free from wanting something, achieving some particular exalted state, or worrying about falling into the conditions of confusion, being free basically from the extremes of samsara and nirvana. So that's an expression of accomplishment. Just make sure we don't conflate these two, yeah? So, so for years, Stephen continues, for years the shiny projections to others of being a good Dharma practitioner may have fooled many, both ourselves and others. Maybe we truly thought we were good practitioners. In this state of delusion, and yet with good conscience, we might spend years straying from the path of awakening. One possible way in which we might stray is by developing a lifestyle that we call being a Buddhist. It becomes habitual. The teachings contain many examples of this. It's important to acquire the tools necessary to recognize whether we are truly on the path or not, to ensure we're not deluding ourselves. And this is as old as Buddhism itself. This very honest self-reflection, where we know, are the thoughts that I'm cultivating, are they really Dharma? Are the actions that are driven by my impulses, are these impulses, are they really Dharmic impulses? The way that I perceive others, the way that I engage with others, the way that I verbalize my world, and so on, is that really Dharma? That's where it's fine. We could call ourselves a Buddhist. Anybody could call themselves a Buddhist. That's not, in any way proprietary. But are we really actually doing something in terms of the path of awakening? Are we honestly really changing our mind? And just calling ourselves a Buddhist, that's not enough. And maybe sometimes there's sort of a sense in some spiritual paths, there is sort of a very dull spirituality where once you sign up and you just sort of go to church and you go to this, that, and the other, then that's good enough. Oh yeah, I've been following the guru all around the planet. I've been to so many teachings. I do this, that, and the other. But unless actually something is shifting, and unless actually our mind, what we call, mingles with the Dharma, then then we can call ourselves anything, and we can call ourselves Buddhist. That might not necessarily help. So that's a very profound point, really, that we need to return to, and it's actually something that in the practice lineage, it's actually something that we would return to every evening, where we would actually say, hey, have I really been practicing the Dharma today, yes or no? And if we haven't, then we actually need to recognize it. There has to be that ability to reflect. And once we reflect on ourselves, our actions, and then to identify what is Dharma and what's not, then to actually be determined to not persevere, not continue what is not Dharma, and to strengthen what is Dharma. That's why very often within the practice lineage, we will very often say at the end of the day, you sort of sit down, you reflect in this way, and then you reconfirm your commitment to the path. And for example, my teacher would very often say, you chant Vajrasattva at the end, to purify reconnect with the purity of the path. Okay. I have had the experience of seeing that I was moving away from the Dharma as time went on, rather than getting closer. Meeting Somsa Jemikin Rinpoche in January completely turned that around. And it's all go from there. Good. Full steam ahead. that's great. And it's sad, when we sort of we become jaded and it becomes very uninspired and so forth. And it's really good when we recognize it and we shift it around. And we get little shocks. I regularly get little shocks about how jaded I am. So yes. The Vajrasattva mantra, is it okay at times just saying the 100-syllable mantra without the visualization? Yeah, we would always say, you'd want to accompany it by 4 strengths. One is the presence of enlightenment in the form of the witness or the teacher or the support. So you can visualize the teacher. You can visualize the teacher as Vajrasattva, also just the teacher in ordinary form. Then there's the regret, saying that was stupid. Then there's the determination, I'm not going to do that again. And then finally, there is actually applying that. Not just saying I won't do it again. That was stupid. I'm not going to do it again. And then also making sure that we actually don't do it again. So that we would say are the 4 strengths: the strength of support, strength of regret, strength of the vow, and strength of the application. Yeah. Okay. Now we come to, let's see if there's one more question here. Okay. And by the way, these 4 strengths, you find this in Words of My Perfect Teacher, and you find it explained many places. Yeah. Okay, so what concretely is the path? Steven said, that brings us to an important question. What concretely is the path? And how would we know? Remembering the example of the rock in the river, we might reflect, I'm wet on the outside, therefore I must be a good Dharma practitioner. I have the costume, I have my meditation beads and my altar, I have my good feelings of devotion, so that should be enough. Well, apparently, it's not enough. The Buddha said there were 8 aspects to this path, the so-called Eightfold Path. Each of these aspects of the path might be seen as indicating a cautionary tale, an indication, a possible repertoire for mindful monitoring, so that at any point we can check whether or not, dharmically speaking, we are drifting away from the path. So this is where the Noble Eightfold Path is a lot more than just us signing up at the local Buddhist church. Steven says, how do we know whether we are on the path? We may have expectations that one day we will find the path. That means that we may have a view that's based on hope and fear. We may think, I hope to be on the path, I fear not being on the path. Therefore, I am on the path. Well, from that point of view, a good little Buddhist, there we are, I really hope I'm doing the dharmic thing, and yeah, I really hope I'm not sort of straying, but that's very vague. Steven continues, that doesn't really seem to correspond to the reality of the path. The main point here is this: although all study and practice of the Buddha Dharma is to stabilize us on the path itself is not the main point of the Dharma. So what then is the point? The main point is arriving at the destination that the path leads to. That goal or destination is the cessation of suffering. And once one arrives, one no longer obsesses about the path. The journey is complete. So this is it really. The Buddha actually never intended for people to be Buddhists. The Buddha, just like doctors don't intend for people to eternally be patients. And we're not expected to eternally be on the path. We're actually expected to achieve awakening. That's what the teachers would want. Of course, our teachers are very patient, and there is a sense that the Bodhisattva has endless patience for sentient beings. But the implication of the path is that something is to be done. Some process is to be done. We're not the guru. The Buddha is not interested in having lots of followers, just like the doctor would like, people to get cured. So the Buddha is anything except anything but somebody who wants a large following. The Buddha would want us to become Buddhas. The Buddha would want us to be like him or herself. So there's not any kind of absolute situation here where we eternally will be sentient beings on the path and eternally there will be the nice lovely Buddha, but there's very much the expectation, certainly the objective that we are taking the medicine, and we're not supposed to endlessly be just addicted to the medicine. We're supposed to actually be cured. We have the famous quote from, or the famous point that Dharmakirti makes, is that the Dharma is like a vessel, a boat that takes us across the ocean, and once we arrive at the other side, we don't need to drag the vessel along with us. Okay, then there's a question here. Jakob, this is on a different topic. It seems to be happening that we have different topics coming in here. Will this course on Thursdays coming up on Dilgukhen's Rinpoche's book be open to anyone? Yeah, that's actually an important point, because a little bit misguided on my point. Actually, I forgot this is actually a restricted text, only intended for people who have received Vajrayana empowerment. So if you haven't received Vajrayana empowerment, then yeah, it's not intended to be studied at this point. It is really for people who then either have received Vajrayana empowerment and who also are practicing. Yeah, but it's good enough if you have. It's good enough if you have received Vajrayana empowerment. But it's a little bit tricky also. I mean, I forgot. I knew that it was a restricted text years ago, and I just forgot about it. I remember when it came out, it was clearly restricted. But the thing is also, what's tricky now is that I think, as far as I understand, in Shambhala Publishing and maybe elsewhere, it's not clear. Certainly in the second edition, it's apparently not clear that it is a restricted text. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Did you know that Steven's talk on Abhidharma given in south of France in 2002 is still available on MP3? No, I didn't. That's great. I thought some people may be interested. It's called Frogs in the Custard. All right. Available on Zamstore. Okay, I wonder if that was given in France. Well, it is, huh? Clearly. So Frogs in the Custard? Okay. Right. Cool. Thank you. I don't have a specific Vajrayana empowerment, but the Longjening Tiglong, yeah, no, that's not enough. I'm afraid Lungs is not enough. You'd have to have been present at an actual Vajrayana empowerment. Sorry. So without Vajrayana empowerment, having just to receive the Lung, no, we wouldn't be qualified to join. Sorry. Okay, 15 days of talk. All right, Steven's a good talker, by the way. So that would be a lot in there. I'm practicing and now getting to the second phase of the preliminaries. Well, look, that's wonderful, and I mean, really, it's an organic development. So I mean, without having completed the Nundro, then we supposedly wouldn't be ready for Vajrayana culture, really. So so it's okay. No rush. No need to rush the Vajrayana. Yeah. No need to rush anything, really. It's about the quality. Yeah. Getting soaked. All right. The Frogs in the Custard talks by Steven Goodman are available for 25 euros. Okay. That's good to know. So that's the ZAM store. Yeah. ZAM. ZAM. This is Rigpa's store. Yeah. Dharma store. Okay. Okay, we'll conclude at this point then. So next time we'll begin the Noble Eightfold Path. And again, I can't emphasize enough how these foundational teachings really, they're never ever, the fact is that the more you actually practice the path, the more all the foundational aspects become more and more sort of vividly, incredibly relevant. So there's never ever such a you know, the unfortunate sign of the unprocessed Buddhist, but like one of these, what is it, the old dog that hasn't been soaked would be, yeah, oh yeah, well that's sort of, that's beginner stuff. That actually doesn't, there's no such a thing as beginner stuff, you know. The thing is, the foundational teachings, the more you practice, the more they become incredibly alive. So, you know, Zen mind, beginner's mind. Yeah. Can we say that the Abhidharma teachings are direct or considered expedient? They're expedient. Most of them are expedient from the point of view that there's still such a thing as samsara that needs to be worked with. So yes, as long as we're still talking about such a thing as samsara, we're still operating with expedient teachings. Yeah, as long as we're still talking about such a thing as Europe, as long as we're still talking about a place called America, we're still talking about a place called India. As long as there's still a place called Australia, we're operating within expedient truth, within the Cinderella teachings, like Tongsa Rinpoche refers to it. So all relative teachings that we have are considered expedient. Yet, for most of us, we operate then and live and experience these realities as being very real. So the Abhidharma is very much teachings that deal with what is real for us. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's dedicate the merit. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be freed. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. Thank you. So we'll just take 2 minutes break, and then I'll say a little bit about practice of meditation, and then we'll do some practice. Yeah. Je t'en prie. Good. Okay. So just a few things about meditation. Overall, in the Buddhist teaching, like we just saw, we wouldn't want to be left as the stone that won't get soaked. By the way, if there's any Bhutanese there, I'm curious because there's a Bhutanese word for a stone that won't take in water, but it basically means also it's a way of telling somebody like you're just you're impossible. Nothing penetrates. And there's a Bhutanese word for that. I'm curious what that is. I once heard about it. Anyway, and the way for actually us to process the information that we receive in the Buddhist teaching, which is understanding how confusion happens and to deal with it and to actually proceed towards less confusion, we need to depart from something that we ordinarily do in Western culture, which we ordinarily do as just ordinary beings, which is think or assume that we can think our way out of it, or we can just act in particular ways. Meditation is where we are actually beginning to work with the very foundation of our being, and we incorporate something that can't be thought. We're incorporating something that can be done in terms of behavior. We're introducing spaciousness. This stands a little bit in opposition to suffering, the way also Steven was presenting it, where he refers to suffering as being crowdedness. And so to introduce this dimension of not doing anything stands radically in opposition to the way that we ordinarily think and operate. So not doing anything is far from easy, but it's also essential if we're going to beginning to have a perspective. So if we for example look, let's see it, actually I think this is from Iceland. Sorry, I usually was having these wallpapers from Tibet, but I've sort of departed a bit, and just now I'm going for just pretty landscapes. But anyway, if we look at if we look at all the details in this landscape, right, we can say, oh, there's so many different things to be known about it. But if we were up at the summit of one of these hills, we'd actually have an overview that would enable us to have a greater understanding. And that's what we do with the practice of meditation. And without that, then we'd always be struggling, basically doing all sorts of patchwork, trying to dam up against all the various causes of our suffering, trying to get things right, rearranging things and so forth. But what we're doing with meditation is actually discovering a perspective where we actually have insight that enables us to operate with clarity and also empowerment without being entangled in the petty concerns and hopes and fears that we ordinarily operate from. The practice of meditation is where we begin to identify with the sky, and we begin to extract ourselves from the worries about whether there's white clouds or dark clouds. It provides a place that allows us spaciousness, that makes us also much more efficacious, much more efficient and well-functioning, capable in terms of our ordinary life. So it's not just that we're gaining some transcendent otherworldly perspective, but we're also enabling ourselves to just function much more practical. We're enabling a dimension of intelligence to become manifest, to flourish. And this muscle of intelligence is what we call prajna. In Buddhism, we sometimes refer to this as wisdom, sometimes we refer to it as intelligence, sometimes as knowledge, and so forth. But it's really something that's innate to us, and it's something that it appears that we're cultivating it in the sense that when we are less entangled in confusion, then prajna or wisdom becomes more manifest. But it is ultimately something that is basic to us, and it's part of our Buddha nature, this quality of prajna. It's wisdom. And the path is what enables us to discover that. So we would say the path has this skillful aspect. Everything that we do in the various Buddhist paths, they're all skillful means to arrive at this uncovering of this undiluted basic condition that we could refer to as prajna. That's therefore, one thing is that we're developing prajna, we're developing greater insight, but we also need means for that to take place, and that's why we need method. So we very often would say that the path needs to have these two aspects. One is the method that's there enabling us to operate with who we are, how we are right now, as we are, starting where we are, being true to what we are, and then begin to uncover a deeper dimension of insight that's natural to us. So right now we're sort of confused, but instead of battling the confusion, we're actually using the reality of our present experience to uncover this far greater perspective that's basic to us. And that's where we would say we always need to have these two aspects of the path. One is what we call method, and the other is wisdom. These two need to be present. So anyway, meditation is then the method. And so the meditation is being proactive in terms of doing something that's essential for us. It's essential for us in every aspect. And the most conspicuous aspect of meditation is the practice of sitting, enabling us to be less distracted, enabling us to be more conscious. And this is what we call shamatha. This is to be calm, to sit. And it's not easy. We have lots of busybody Buddhists who are engaged in all sorts of profound things, and they don't sit. And as a result, then the Dharma just becomes another thing that generates, thoughts and so on. To meditate is actually to begin to calm down, to begin to be less conflicted, to begin to actually find peace, proper peace within. And this might sound boring. There might be some tantrikas who say, oh, I'm frightfully colorful and erotic and very interesting, and I have all these issues and there are obstacles on the path, I'm having this condition or that condition, and it's all just, I'm powering on, And there's a remarkable sort of oblivion with regards for the absolutely essential practice of just grounding ourselves and actually establishing peace. And it's not as if we're going to become dull from peace. It's actually there where we begin to become clear and also begin to become very optimistic with regards to working with our condition. So the practice of sitting has this aspect of shamatha, of creating the conditions for peace. But what comes out of that is a freedom from the ordinary unconscious rule of our inner narratives, our inner ruminations, our inner assumptions, our inner beliefs about ourselves. And that's where we begin to extract ourselves from we've been spoon-fed some belief in I am in a particular way, or I am traumatized, or I have this psychological material and I can't get over it. It's just who I am. And these kind of belief systems are so insidiously basic to the assumption that we are hardwired in a particular way. What we do with the practice of meditation is introduce a dimension of plasticity, that actually we are flexible. We're not at all doomed to continue being in one particular way. And so the practice of creating peace and creating calm opens up for a wider perspective on who we are. And this is then where we see our person is made up of conditions that are workable. And this is exactly what Steven was just saying in our study, that we're made up of conditions that are where we can see how we're curable. That is then what we through the practice of meditation, and particularly then through this wider perspective of vipassana, we begin to actually discover a reality of ourself beyond what we ordinarily thought we were. So this is really essential in that, and without that, we can read about all these sort of profound, all these profound perspectives and these wonderful sort of, we feel good when we read about the lives of the teachers, or we read Vajrayana Sadhana, or we read the sort of Mahayana pith instructions and all of that. And we also feel good when we encounter teachers and they're so remarkable and so on. But what we're continually doing is actually holding on to an umbilical cord where we're continually just constructing ourselves as helpless and in need of something external. And so meditation is, to a large extent, cutting this umbilical cord and finding empowerment from within, finding that we could actually be free. So that's what we do with the practice of meditation. So meditation is really indispensable. Now, in terms of how we're practicing here, in terms of how we practice in the living traditions of the practice lineages of Tibet, is that we can very much combine shamatha vipassana with some very skillful practices, such as, of course, Vajrayana sadhana and so forth, which celebrate and which empower this dimension of already spontaneous awakening that exists from within, that's basic to us. And this, of course, is where the practice of Nundro and so forth leads us to this experience. But even before Nundro, then we would just have the practice of invoking enlightenment through the memory of the Buddha, perhaps reading scriptures, perhaps chanting mantras or whatever, but invoking this quality of the sacred before we actually settle into meditation. So that's what we do here with the practice of the treasure of blessing from Jamgon Mipa Rinpoche. Mipa Rinpoche, by the way, was extraordinary, actually in terms of Tibetan Buddhism in general. I remember Tuku Pema Wangel telling us that, well, I think, of course, Tuku Pema Wangel is, I think, quoting other lamas as well, but we would say that Jamgon, where Tibetan lamas in general, they would have visions of, say, great bodhisattvas like Tara and Manjushri, or perhaps Padmasambhava and so forth. Not so many had actually visions of the Buddha. This is very often because it's such a Vajrayana universe. Of course, all these various aspects of enlightenment are all inseparable from the Buddha. But Jamgon Mipam was unusual in having a direct vision of the Buddha. And it's on the basis of that then that he wrote a very big work that's called The White Lotus, Damche Pema Karpo, which is a huge work, which I don't think sections of it have been translated by Tatang Rinpoche now. But other than that, then there's not really so much, but in English that's been translated as far as I know. But in conjunction with that, then he wrote this very beautiful short liturgy that we're chanting here, that invokes then the Buddha, based on Jamgon Mipam's own experience and encounter with or vision of the Buddha. So we chant that first, really invoking the presence of awakening. And of course, we invoke the Buddha as external, but then again, also we dissolve this reference point of the Buddha at one point and simply settle into that. We consider the Buddha settles into us, and rather rays of lights from the Buddha permeate us, and we achieve then all the qualities of the path. We simply settle into the already spontaneous present enlightenment that is basic to us. And from that point of view, then we've actually been, you could say, empowered in the sense of our basic unconfused nature is is exposed or handed to us. At that point, we just can settle into then the practice of non-distraction and not being entangled in thoughts, and allowing for, you could say, the mind's natural clarity to emerge. We're not constructing anything. We're not sitting waiting for the nature of mind to appear or anything. We're simply just relaxing in not being carried away by the thoughts. But through the blessing, or through the presence of the Buddha, then which then penetrates our ordinary concerns. The moment you're thinking of the Buddha, it takes over. It's something significant. Then we have some insight into, or some connection with that which is greater than just our ordinary habitual projections and ordinary habitual narratives of mind. So it's quite significant to preface any meditation practice with something like that. So then when we're meditating, there's three aspects that we could attend to. One is our posture and the body, where we just want to sit straight. Also take our back. We don't have to sit on the floor, but we could sit on a chair. But either way, we sit with our back straight, and also our shoulders a little bit sort of taken back, holding them back a little bit. Yeah, we don't slouch. That's the thing. You know, you meditate. You don't want to end up like Rodin's thinker. You know. Yeah, you sit straight, dignified, like a samurai warrior, or a yogi, you have the image of the Buddha, so you sit like that. Then also the chin a little bit in, the gaze lowered, you don't close your eyes entirely, and you relax the jaw. In case you need to breathe through your mouth, then you do that, and you have your hands on the knees or in your lap, and these then constitute the basics of the posture. So that's the first point. Then the second point is focusing the mind on the breath. Now, this is quite helpful because focusing the mind on the breath is something that's not conceptual. There's not concepts involved. There's a reference point, and that's quite helpful for us who still operate with reference points. So the mind is always seeking for something to occupy itself with. So if we're minimizing what the mind occupies itself with. We're just focusing on the breath, and that actually allows for that fresh spaciousness, where indeed there might be the clouds or the waves of the mind that comes and goes, but we still just by being attentive to the breath, then we're not carried away by this. It's simply what connects us to openness, to being present, to not falling into our absorption in our thinking. So the second point is then to be attentive to the out breath, and then the third one is then, as thoughts arise, that we acknowledge that there's something happening in our mind, and that sort of sparks a little bit of wakefulness. It's just like if, for example, if we all of a sudden have an itch. I mean, we might think of that as uncomfortable, but actually the itch, when it happens, then there's actually something that takes a little bit of adrenaline that happens, and we become sharper. And likewise, also thoughts arise in the mind, or we recognize that we're tagging along with thoughts, and that in itself actually enables us to come back to just being present. So we could say thoughts in some way precipitate a moment of clarity, but we don't hold on to the thoughts. And that's what the big difference between meditation and not meditating. It's where we are not being carried along and absorbed by our unconscious tagging along distractedly with our thoughts. We actually come back to this open space of just being connected with being present. We don't even particularly need to define what it is that we're connecting with, but as thoughts arise, to just allow them to be there and not be tangled by them. That's then where the third aspect of the meditation technique is just to say whatever arises, we just label it thinking. We just think, oh yeah, there's thoughts, And then we just, we come back to the breath as you could say, the anchor or the reference point, but we're not particularly taking the breath as some sort of place that we go to. Trungpa, he'll make a point about how, we could sort of just try to avoid the sort of the embarrassing aspects of our psychology by just saying, oh yeah, well, I don't want to know about my own mind. I'll just come back to the breath. That's not at all the case. When with the practice of meditation, we become intimately aware of all sort of the sort of ordinary qualities of our mind that we probably know about, but then again, sometimes as we're sitting, we might discover things about our mind that we're kind of a bit uncomfortable with. But so what? There's a very accommodating quality about meditation where the thoughts, they are not viewed as being evil or being a problem, as long as we're not absorbed in them. Because if we get absorbed in them, yes, like I was just talking to a friend today, and I remember this one, something we have in the Pith instructions very often, which is this quote from the Tantras where it says, thoughts are what plunges into the ocean of samsara. And of course, being caught up in our thinking, yeah, that's where we perpetuate our confusion. We're not stopping thoughts here in any way, but we're also not sort of we're not tagging along with them. We're not submitting to them. We're not controlled by the thoughts. We are allowing them to be, just like if you look at the wallpaper here and you see the clouds, they're there, but the sky itself is unstained by them. So we have this sort of courageous attitude with regards to thoughts as we're meditating, that they're allowed to be there, but we don't sort of get absorbed and carried away by them. So this actually enables us to be, you could say, connect with the world, be open to where we are, and actually get out of our heads. So it's a extremely healthy enterprise, meditating. It's the opposite of what it might look like. People might think, oh yeah, people are meditating, they're sitting there ruminating and thinking. It's the exact opposite. But of course, also it's up to us to not then tag along with the thoughts. It's up to us to not sit and ruminate and not to be absorbed in the thoughts. And that is where it's very helpful to have then the breath to come back to. Yeah. Okay. Some questions here. So then there's a question. I've heard that the moment of death is something we want to practice meditation for. Considering in the West, most of us will die laying down. Is there any value in trying to do our meditation laying down? Yeah, we could. We would say it's quite helpful before we practice meditation lying down to already have a foundation of meditating sitting up. So certainly we shouldn't how do you say, substitute sitting up but with lying down. But then again, when we are lying down, we could try to integrate the mindfulness that we cultivate through meditating sitting up. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we'll just again take just a short break, 2 minutes, and then we'll begin the practice of meditation. We'll do the chanting of the Treasure of Blessing liturgy, and then we'll do the then we'll meditate for 15 minutes. I'll cut the video feed and the audio feed at that point. I'll put an image in, and the different lamas that the pictures I have, they're not always meditating, but then again, being sublime beings, just having their image there, I think, inspires us as we're practicing. So I'll have different pictures of different lamas that I'll put in there together with the image of the Buddha. Yeah. Okay, 2-minute break, and then we'll start the practice. So here we begin with taking refuge, developing the enlightened motivation, and then also um, expressing and cultivating the four immeasurables. And then we, as the main practice, then visualizing the Buddha. And then we have the supplication to the Buddha in the form of what we can call the 7 branches of puja. And then we have a very essential supplication, and then the chanting of the dharani, or the mantra of the Buddha. And those of you who are doing the Bhumisparsha, I'll give a little bit of advice at the end, just at the end of the session, just about that. If I forget, then remind me. But it's just that this is something that a lot of us are doing presently. Yeah. So. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. May all beings enjoy happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the sacred happiness devoid of suffering. And may they dwell in boundless equanimity that is free from attachment and aversion. As the union of unborn emptiness and the ceaseless appearances of interdependence, magically there appears before me in the sky, amidst vast clouds of offerings, on a jewel-lined throne and lotus, sun, and moon disk seats, the incomparable teacher, Lion of the Shakyas. His body the color of gold, adorned with major and minor marks, clad in the 3 Dharma robes, he sits in Vajra posture. His right hand gracefully poised in the earth-touching mudra, and his left hand in the gesture of meditation, holding an alms bowl full of nectar. Like a mountain of gold, magnificent, he shines in splendor, spreading beams of wisdom light across the whole expanse of space. The 8 close suns, 16 elders, and the like, a vast ocean-like retinue of noble beings encircles him all around. Simply think of him and he grants the glory of the highest bliss, liberation from samsara and nirvana, the 2 extremes. He is the great being, perfect embodiment of every source of refuge. With your great compassion, you embrace this turbulent and degenerate world and made 500 mighty aspirations. You are exalted as the white lotus. Whoever hears your name shall never return to samsara. Most compassionate teacher, to you I pay homage. All my own and others' virtues of body, speech, and mind, together with all our possessions, visualized like Samantabhadra's offering clouds, I offer to you. All the harmful actions and transgressions I have committed through beginningless time, each and every one I now confess with intense and heartfelt regret. In all virtuous actions of the noble ones and ordinary beings accumulated throughout the past, present, and future, I rejoice. Turn the wheel of the profound and vast Dharma teachings ceaselessly and in every direction, I pray. Your wisdom body is like space and remains changeless throughout past, present, and future. Yet in the perception of those to be guided, you go through the display of birth and death. Even so, let your form body continue always to appear. Through all the virtues I have accumulated in the past, am accumulating now, and will accumulate in the future, for the sake of benefiting beings who are as infinite as space, may you, the sovereign of Dharma, be forever pleased, and may all attain the state of the victorious one, the Lord of Dharma. Living beings like us, adrift in this degenerate age, have no guidance nor protection. Because of your kindness, caring for us with surpassing compassion, every manifestation in this world now of the three jewels is your enlightened activity. You are then our only refuge, incomparable, supreme. So from our hearts we pray with total confidence and faith. Do not neglect the great promises you made in times gone by, but hold us until we attain enlightenment with your compassion. Supreme Teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Supreme Teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfect, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Supreme Teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Te yatao muni muni mahamunaya soha. 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 Om 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 muni muni mahamunaya soha. From the Buddha's body, there emanates a great radiance, a multicolored rays of wisdom light, dispelling all our own and others' obscurations, and causing all the genuine qualities of the Mahayana path to arise within us, so that we attain the level of perfection from which we will never return again to samsara. So we'll conclude with aspirations and dedications. First, the aspiration prayer, Maitreya. I prostrate to all the Buddhas and to the Bodhisattvas endowed with the divine eye of the sages, and to the Shravakas as well. I prostrate to Bodhicitta, which counteracts births in all lower realms, perfectly shows the path to the higher realms, and leads to no aging, no death. Whatever negative actions I have done under the influence of an afflicted mind, in the presence of the Buddhas, I fully acknowledge them all. By the accumulation of any merit I have created through the three kinds of activities, may my seeds of omniscience grow, and may I attain awakening that never ends. Whatever offerings to the Buddhas that can be found in the realms of the 10 directions are known to the Buddhas who rejoice in them. I rejoice in all these offerings. I fully acknowledge all negative actions and rejoice in all merit. I prostrate to all the Buddhas. May I attain supreme primordial wisdom. I earnestly request the Bodhisattvas who reside on the 10 levels in all the direction of the worlds in the 10 directions to awaken into supreme enlightenment. Once you have awakened into genuine enlightenment and tamed the Maras and their hordes, may you turn the wheel of Dharma so that all living beings may be healed. With the sound of the great Dharma drum, may you free all sentient beings who are suffering. Throughout inconceivable millions of kalpas, may you remain and teach the Dharma. Mired in the swamp of desire, entangled in the strands of cyclic existence, I am fettered by all that binds. I supplicate those supreme among humans to look upon me. The Buddhas do not blame sentient beings who are flawed. With a loving heart for all sentient beings, may the Buddhas free them from the ocean of cyclic existence. Any perfect Buddhas who are present, those who have passed away, and those yet to come, may I train, following in their way, and engage in enlightened conduct. Having perfected the 6 paramitas, may I liberate the 6 families of sentient beings. Having actualized the 6 extraordinary faculties, may I reach unexcelled enlightenment. Future phenomena are not born, and those past will not occur. Present phenomena have no inherent nature. There is no actual location. There is no perception. There are no outer things. May I realize the Dhammadhatu of emptiness. According to the Buddhas, the great sages, there are no truly existent sentient beings, no life force. There is no truly existent individual and no nurturing of a self. May I realize the Dharmata where the self is not present. An entity such as grasping onto a self and mind is not present within any of the paramitas. To benefit all sentient beings, may I give with generosity, free of avarice. Since things do not exist as entities, may my wealth appear spontaneously. Since all things totally disintegrate, may I perfect the paramita of generosity. Endowed with a flawless ethics that is guided by rules, and an ethics that is completely pure. With an ethics free of an arrogant mind, may I perfect the paramita of ethics. Just as the elements of earth, water, fire, and wind, bodhisattvas do not remain caught by mental constructs. By attaining patience, anger never arises. May I perfect the paramita of patience. Through the power of previous perseverance, having become stable, enthusiastic, and free of laziness, and through a strong body and mind, may I perfect the paramita of perseverance. Through the samadhi where all is illusion-like, through the samadhi of the hero's stride, and through the samadhi that is like a vajra, may I perfect the paramita of meditative concentration. Through actualizing the 3 gates of full liberation, the equal nature of the 3 times, and the 3 types of knowing as well, may I perfect the paramita of prajna. Through persevering in a bodhisattva's practice, may I attain the kaya praised by all the Buddhas, the luminous kaya and the kaya blazing with majesty. Thus may my intention be fulfilled. May I be like the famed Maitreya who engaged in such a practice, perfected the paramitas, and perfectly abides at the zenith of the 10th level. By this merit may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be freed. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. May the Buddha appear in this world, may the light of the teaching shine like the sun, may the holders of the teaching live in harmony, and thus may all be auspicious for the teaching to endure. We pray for the good health of the teachers. We pray for their precious lives to be long. We pray for their activities to spread and increase. May we be blessed never to part from the teachings. Akashasya stiti yavat yavacha jagataha stiti Tavan mama stiti bhuyat jagadukani nignata. Akashasya stiti yavat yavacha jagatah stiti tavan mama stiti bhuyat jagadukani nignata. Tavan mama stiti bhuyat jagadukani nignata. Tavan mama stiti bhuyat jagadukani nignata. As long as space remains, as long as the world remains, may I too remain to alleviate the sufferings of the world. So that concludes our study and practice session. And I'll just say a little bit about the chanting of in conjunction with the Bhumi Sparsha. So, as many of you know, then Tsongsa Gyalmen Khyentse Rinpoche has encouraged invoking the Buddha and particularly chanting the Buddha's, we call it Dharani, and the one which says Teyata, we generally refers to as a Dharani. When we say Om, I think that's more referred to as a mantra. But either way, this recitation of Om Muni Muni Maha Munaya Soha, and there's also the alternative Om Muni Muni Maha Om Muni Muni Maha Om Muni Muni Shakyamuni Soha, I think. These then Rinpoche has asked us to accumulate, and also you would have received a mail which has a link to where you can report then how many you've done. But then what we've been doing is, for example, in the morning when we do the sitting from 7 to 7:30, then we've also added on to that half an hour of the practice we've just done here. So that then for the 15 minutes or so of that time, then we sit and accumulate the mantra. But you can also do this at any time, and of course you can do this sadhana any time that you wish. It's really quite short, actually, just from the beginning of the sadhana up until you chant the mantra. It's only 5 minutes, so I mean, it should be doable. At the same time, you can also, and that's what I just wanted to say, there's a place in the practice where it says Supreme Teacher. This one here, yeah, Supreme Teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, Complete and Perfect Buddha, etc. You could just begin there. You recite this once or 3 times, and then you can take it from there with chanting Om Muni Muni Maha Munaya Soha. So when there's not time, and if you wish to then, which is nice really, sort of sets the atmosphere a little bit to just chant this invocation, Supreme Teacher Bhagavan, and so on, then you can accumulate from there. So that's what I just wanted to say. And you probably have heard this elsewhere, but just to reiterate. May I ask, please, where one can acquire that Shakyamuni Buddha picture? And I can put it up there. This actually, I think this comes from Rigpa. I mean, this is definitely a Rigpa Tanka. It's sitting as public domain, so I think that's all right. I actually just edited it today, slightly gave it a little bit darker color, but I'll put it up in the resource or the reading material folder, so you can find it there. But otherwise, also you can go through Dzam. I'm sure it might be available through Dzam. I'm not sure, but it is a Rigpa. It's a Rigpa. It's a Rigpa Tanka. It's actually very beautiful because you have many of the masters of the Tibetan lineage here. First of all, you have the Dharmakaya Samantabhadra, Sambhogakaya Vajradhara, and then the Nyamanakaya Buddha, which is actually according to a vision by Gyalmen Khyentse Chugilodra. Somewhere there is a liturgy for this, but I've asked Rinpoche a few times and I haven't received an answer. So here we have then the Buddhas of the 3 times. This is the Buddha of the present time, the Buddha of the past and future. Then we have great masters of the Nyingma lineage, which are then Guru Rinpoche and Vimala Mitra. Then I think we have what we call the 8 close sons of the Buddha, the 8 Bodhisattvas, 4 over here and 4 over here. And then we have other great masters of the lineages that were brought to Tibet. These are Indian masters. I think this is, this would be, I'm not sure, can't see actually the detail, but it's probably like, you know, Tilopa, Naropa, possibly Sukhasiddhi, who was a great woman, who was very important for the lineages that came to Tibet. And I'm not sure who else. Anyway, then we have over here, you have Nagarjuna, you have a Sangha, and these then constitute what we call the 2 supreme. And then you have 3 masters here and 3 masters here. These are what we call the 6 ornaments. These are Vasubandhu, Dharmakirti, I forget. I actually can't remember. I think Dignaga. Some of you probably know better than I. And then down here, I think this would be Atisha and this would be Milarepa, possibly. Just guessing here a bit. And then we have, what have we here? I'm not sure. This would probably be Shariputra and Moggalliyana. And then you have 6 other monks here. I'm not sure what they are. Then you have what we call the 3 founding fathers, Mebu Namsum, I think they're called, which are the 3 kings that actually were principal in establishing Buddhism in Tibet. So you have King Songtsen Gampo here, then you have King Trison Detsen, and then you have King Tri Jalpachen. And it's then at the end of Tri Jalpachen's rule then that the Tibetan Empire collapsed, and then you have sort of a different style of rule that emerged in Tibet after that time. Then finally we have wealth gods down here, black Tsambala, yellow Tsambala, and what is it again? Vishravana, I think. Yeah, that's one of the 4 guardian kings. Yeah. All right. So someone's asking the name of the practices we've just done. It should be up in the resource folder, but if not, I'll put it up there. It's the Treasure of Blessing from Jamgon Viparamajit. So look, I'll put this up there in that folder. Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you for joining in, and Delia, shall see you again. Thank you. Okay, one last question. What's the difference between A and A? I don't know. It looks like the same to me. Sometimes we write the R with 2 dots at the end, which is true. It makes it a bit longer, and sometimes just the short. Yeah, but they generally both refers to because they're the primordial syllable. Yeah. Sometimes also they sort of indicate the primordial nature of reality. Okay. Bye-bye.